Hello there and welcome to my YouTube channel Designs by Dee. My name is Deepa Robbins and today I'm going to be creating a couple Mother's Day cards that are Spellbinder heavy. Now I please ask you to bear with me because it has been a long time since I've created a video and I'm now a couple years older and I have another child. So as you can imagine, it's pretty hectic. So let's go ahead and get into these couple cards that I made here. So first of all, I'm using the Spellbinders Large Die of the Month for April 2021. Now, as you can see, it's got a lot of these wavy little dies and a guide on the back. And I actually recently subscribed to their value pack, which includes the Glimmer kit right here and Small Die of the Month. Now, I find these Spellbinders kits very cool because as you can see, that large die and the Glimmer kit kind of go together and they coordinate, and the small die kind of stands alone. So I'm just going to use the Glimmer kit and the large die, and I'll take this kind of flower border and that little lattice piece and stick them together here. So I'm using some low-tack tape, some washi tape to stick them together to do my die cutting. And that's what I really like about these Spellbinders dies. They make them in such a way that you can coordinate all the different little elements in different ways, so the possibilities are endless. Now I'm using some navy cardstock here. This is 80-pound cardstock from Clear Path Paper. I got it off of Amazon and I made two tick marks there. One was at 4 inches and the other was at 8 because I'm making a slimline card, but I don't really like them at 3.5 inches. I like them a little bigger than that. So now I've attached my die and put it through my die cutting machine. Now I have the big shot machine, so I don't really do a lot of die cutting on screen as that's a huge thing to kind of fit on the camera. But you can see it didn't cut properly. And I just want to be clear that it wasn't the die that caused this or even the die cutting machine. It was my acrylic pads. They're kind of warped and they kind of bump up in the middle, and that's why the middle didn't get cut. So there are two ways to correct this. First of all is using my craft knives. So I get out my X-Acto knife set and I just start cutting because there is an impression where the little pieces should come out. And I'll just cut around there with my knife and take each piece out. It's a little tedious, but I don't want to put my die over top of that and risk ruining it. So here's another one that I cut out of the turquoise cardstock. This is also from Clear Path, and it's an 80-pound cardstock off of Amazon. So here's the other trick using a metal shim, and you'd have to do this beforehand. You put it underneath your acrylic pad, put your cardstock, then your die, and then your next acrylic pad on top, and then put it through your machine. It should give you a better cut, especially for these intricate dies that we have. Now, another issue I seem to have that I know a lot of other people have is choosing a color scheme. So I have the navy cardstock here, and what I did was kind of look up a color scheme that I liked online, and I usually type in color palette. And then I matched up my cardstocks with the color scheme there. Now, that's not always workable because, see, I have these 3 cardstocks. This one is actually an opulent rose gold from the Sizzix Surfaces cardstock pack. And the 2 other pinky corally hues, I'm actually going to use ink. So here's how I keep my color swatches. As you can see, I have a bunch of different ones, and this is how I keep the Ultra New line. I decided to match up the color to these 2 crisp dye inks. This one is Coral Bliss, and this one is Heartbeat. They're both from the same line, so they're in line in terms of color. And what I'm going to do is create my own colored cardstock. So I'll take some white cardstock. This one I think is Nina. And I'm going to be putting the ink from my pad, my ink pad, right onto the cardstock. And I make sure that it's really saturated so that the color is very intense. And I'm using both colors on either side of the cardstock. An important note to make is that you have to make sure that these dies are dry on the paper before you actually die cut anything out of them. So there's the final color scheme. Now here is a little trick I do. I don't have a scoring board, so I actually use my paper cutter to score a line down the center, and that's a scoring tool that I have from my We Are Memory Keepers envelope creator. So anyways, I keep that aside and I use that for folding my cardstock because I don't actually have a good bone folder. Those are the two colors there. My next step is going to be to create my card inside, or basically my card base. I use Hammermill copy color cover sheets. These, it says it's printer paper, but it's actually like thick cardstock that you can use as a good base. And what I did was sort of make a tick at the back where I can sort of measure like the full width of the card. And then I fold it over and then I'll cut again so I get the right size. So there you have it. Now, one other thing I wanted to add was a little bit of a border on the inside, but if you can see from the front, I can't have it all the way down each 4 sides of the paper. So what I had to do was mark off where that lattice kind of ends on both sides of the paper. And I'm going to draw a little tick mark on each side a little further in. And I'm going to cut out a small little border. Now at first I used the guillotine cutter and realized it's not really going to work. So I went back to my trimmer and I didn't actually measure it, but I did, I think, about a 2/8 of an inch border on those 3 edges. So I'll cut the paper here, and then what I'll do is I'll cut it off where I made those little ticks. So about 1/4 of the paper is going to be the full width, so that the front has is completely like in line with that turquoise piece, and then as you can see, the inside has a bit of a border. Now the next set that I'm going to use is a Spellbinders Small Die of the Month. This one's from June 2020. I wasn't subscribed then, so I actually bought this later on, which you can do, but I think it costs a little more. I'm going to use this little floral piece, and I'll cut out some metallic cardstock. This is also from Sizzix. It's also the Sizzix Surfaces, and it's a silver cardstock. So I cut out the die cut there, and then I also cut it out of that rose gold opulent paper. And this time I didn't release all the papers from the die. So I'm going to use this Artist-tac permanent dry adhesive. It's really cool to use with intricate die cuts. You kind of release the paper, put your die cut in between, and kind of burnish it down. And it picks up dry adhesive on the back, so you can stick it down wherever you want and your hands remain completely unsticky. So as you can see, I've attached that silver cardstock or die piece to the white cardstock, and now I have some Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky glue that I'm going to use to attach these peachy petals, or sorry, rose gold petals into those little areas. So this would be an inlay technique. This is just a small version of it, but there are definitely videos out there with full cards done in this style. So what I'm going to do is lay my die cut with the pieces inside it over top of the other one, and then push down the little pieces so that they stick to the glue underneath. That didn't quite work out for me, but luckily for me, my little flower petals here are pretty different, so it's easy to kind of match them up if I pop out all the pieces. Now it might be a little harder when I get to the leaves, but I do only have about 8 leaves, so it really shouldn't be too hard to do that here. So I'm using this jewel picker, and it's actually from Amazon. It's pretty cheap, and it has like different heads that you can change. That little white tip is actually wax. So it's very good for picking up little pieces of paper or gems to attach to cards. It really comes in handy, even there, for popping out little pieces. So it really is a multifunctional tool. So now that I've got all my petals in, I'll go ahead and cut the leaves out of some of that minty green cardstock. And once again, I'm leaving it in the die so that I can kind of match up the leaves. It's easier to probably do this overlay technique like this, or you can cut out the leaves, pop out the leaves from the die one by one and then put them into each of those little sections there, just because there's only 8 of them. If you had a lot more, that would take much longer to do, and therefore you might want to use the technique I was initially trying to do. So there we have it all put together, and my last step here is to cut it out. So because I adhered it to a different sheet of paper rather than I guess my card front, I have to cut it out because it's going to be more of a die cut element to put on top of my card. And I lied. My last step is coloring. So I'm going to do some Copic coloring with my Copic Chows. The colors are listed below, and I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just doing some flicking from the inner part of the petals outwards with the darkest color, and then I use the second darkest color to kind of blend the first color outwards, and then the lightest color to blend the first 2 colors completely out to the edge. This gives you a nice soft, subtle, like gradient look, and it's really just using a flicking technique. Now, if you can see there in between, I'm using my nail to kind of take something off of the silver metallic die cut, and that's because the alcohol inks will stick to this shiny surface, and you'll see a bit of that pink on the silver. But there is a way to correct this, and I'll show you that in a minute. So this is not too hard to do. After I get the petals all colored and done, then I'll move on to the leaves, and you can see that here in a minute. This video is a bit long, but I swear I have like a little bit of different things. I'm doing a bit of die cut inlay, I'm doing a bit of glimmering, I'm doing a bit of bejeweling, and I'm pretty sure you'll find something you like in here. So I'll move on to the green, colors listed below. And same thing, it's really haphazard. I like this flicking technique because it gives you a nice veiny type look, especially with flowers and leaves and things that are veiny. And I actually went over the inner part of the leaves with the darker color again at the end because I liked that look here. Now here I'm showing you where the pink kind of went over the silver, and I have my colorless blender, and all I'm going to do is use that to go over the silver parts to take the pink off. As you can see, I go over that piece, get the pink on the brush, and then I'll take it off onto another piece of paper. And I'll continue in this fashion until I've got all the ink off of the places that I don't want it to be. Now, my next step is going to be to do the inside of my card. And I make sure that I do these, especially if I'm doing stamping before I adhere it to the front of the card. So here I'm using this Mom's Clematis stamp set from Simon Says. It's actually an older set, and I think it's retired. So if you have it, you have it. If you don't, I'm sorry. I don't know that you can get a hold of it. But I'm using some of this VersaFine Clara Medieval Blue ink to stamp one of these really nice sentiments from this stamp set into the center. Everything in the stamp set is perfect for Mother's Day, from the sentiments to the little pictures of the clematis to this mother stamp, which is from the same stamp set. So I've positioned it, my die cut there. That's the extra die cut that I'm going to use on the inside, and stamped where I need to stamp. Next, I'm going to do the front of the card front and add my sentiment. I'm going to be doing some heat embossing here. I'm using some Versamark ink and this Happy Mother's Day sentiment from the Simon Says stamp Wake Up and Makeup stamp set. And I'm going to be heat embossing it with some white embossing powder from Simon Says. Now, as you can see, I forgot to use my anti-static powder tool because I just completely forgot. And I'm pretty sure everybody else does this, but there is a way to fix it, a pretty simple way. I tapped off as much as I could, and then what I'm going to do is take a dry brush, a small little paintbrush, and I'm just going to kind of rub off all the little pieces that I don't want. And I find that as long as you move that brush across the pieces of powder that you want to move and then tap it, it just seems to come off. So the next step is to heat up that embossing powder with my heat gun. I'll make sure it's heated up for a few seconds there before I take it to the paper to melt that powder. And voila, the magic occurs and the embossing powder melts to the paper. I think this is one of the most magical parts of creating cards, and I recommend everybody try heat embossing. So once that's done, I'll move on to the next step. So I actually used all the little flowers and leaf pieces or dies from the Spellbinders die of the month to cut out all these little pieces from the different colored cardstocks that I picked out to use. And I'm just going to assemble them here on my card. I kind of just lay them out where I like them, and then I start gluing them down. I like using the Craft Tacky glue because it is a liquid glue, and with liquid glues it has a bit of give, so you can kind of move it around a bit, and especially with these little green leaves, you kind of have to lift up the petals and stick them in behind, so the liquid glue really helps with that. And what I'm mainly doing is I'm covering up all of that blue, the frame piece at the bottom with the different die cuts here to create more of a fluid card. Now that the little flower that I cut out there and did the inlay technique with, I attached to my card with some foam pieces. And then I added a couple more flowers around the sentiment and on that lattice area. Now, none of my cards are complete without some bling, so these are actually the beads, sorry, not beads, but gems that I've been using on all my cards. They're called LolliBeads, and I got them on Amazon. They're actually sold as nail art gems, and that's why you probably won't see them if you're looking up gems for cards or for crafting, because they're actually used for nails, and they range in size from 1.5 to 5 millimeters, so they're actually quite acceptable to use on cards. And there's a range of sizes that comes in one order. So as you can see, I've used the bigger ones for the centers of the larger flowers and smaller ones for the smaller flowers. So that was the navy card. I'm going to move on to the turquoise one. And for this one, I'm going to do some glimmer foiling. So I'm using this plate with all the little flowers in it, and I'm going to use some rose gold foil from Spellbinders. It's very important to note that you do get the Spellbinders foil or foil specifically for glimmer foiling using a glimmer foil system. I have a bunch of thermoweb foils and I've tried it. They do not work with this system. They don't use the same technique, so you have to make sure you're getting the right foils. So what I'll do is heat up my system here. As you can see, the green light is solid, saying that it's prepared. I'll put down my cardstock with the foil and the plate, and then the shim and the acrylic plate on top. I set the timer, waited for it to turn solid green, and then put it through my die cutting machine to add pressure. Now it comes with these cool little metallic plier type things to pull off the hot plate so you don't burn yourself. And there's the result that you get. Now I went ahead and foiled the other side of it as well. And I'm also going to be foiling this Glimmered Botanical plate as well. So my element for this card is going to be this flower, and I'm going to use the same foil, the rose gold, and I'm going to put it on that peachy cardstock again. So I'm using this sort of flap technique, which I got from Yana Smakula. I watch a lot of her videos, especially for glimmering, especially since she has her own glimmer line with Spellbinders. And one of the things I hate doing with my foil is wasting it. So as you can see here, I'm putting down some foil for this one flower piece, but as you can see, a part of it is hanging off with no foil. So all I do is cut another piece, and even if it overlaps with the second foil piece, you never notice. You can foil once, foil twice, foil 3 times, as many times as you want, as far as I can tell with the Glimmer foil system, as long as your plates are put in the exact same spot and you won't notice a difference in the foiling at all. So here you can see my foiling wasn't perfect. I probably heated it up a bit too long or put it through my die cutting machine more than once. So I have this Couture Creations detailer tool. What it is a small little spinning eraser. And it has a little button here, so it uses a battery. And you kind of just press the button. It starts twirling around, rotating, and you just put it wherever you want that foil to be removed. Now, I know some of the foil doesn't always leave depending on how much pressure was applied, so I end up using my Tombow Mono Eraser here. So one of the two tools or both together, they usually work to get rid of any foiling mistakes. Now I'm going to add my dies and cut out those little pieces. The next step will be to put them all together. So I've done a bit more foiling, as you can see on those yellow little centers with some gold foil. And now I'm just going to use some of my craft tacky glue to attach all the pieces that I've die cut together. So I've looked at other creations online to try to figure out how to line up these dies, but it's pretty forgiving. So you can put it any which way you want as long as it sort of fits on there, and it's going to look good either way. So now this little flower was a little confusing to me. What I'm going to do is put that little, this one little piece is actually a negative die cut, and I'm going to use it to hold that yellow piece inside so that it looks like it's kind of coming from a petal from inside. And I thought that worked out pretty well. So there are my two little flowers, and just as before, I die cut out all these tiny little elements using a different color scheme to go with the turquoise. I've got some yellows and browns in there. And just as before, I'm just going to place them on my card where I think I want them, and then eventually glue them down. And just like the other card, I'm going to be putting these two little flowers in the corner as a point of dimension, I guess you could say, because I've attached them with some foam tape so that they stick up a little bit from the card. And just like the other card, I added those little gems, and you can see I added some more flowers on the inside of the card for interest. It just ties the front in to the middle. So those are the two cards that I've created for you today. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you're inspired in some way or form. And I definitely encourage you to check out the Spellbinders website and check out their club kits. They tend to coordinate, just as you saw, the Glimmer kit coordinated with the large die of the month. And there's also a stamp set you can get. I find that the price point is very good, and I'm actually in Canada, so I get these shipped and I pay the shipping charges, and it's still worth it. So go ahead, log on to their site and check these out. I guarantee you're going to have fun each month, just like I have. If you liked my video, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe, because I guarantee you I've got a bunch more ideas coming your way. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.